This is an NBC News special report. Here's Lester Holt.
Good afternoon, everyone. We're coming on the air to bring you live coverage of the first day of confirmation hearings for Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson, President Biden's nominee to replace retiring Justice Stephen Breyer on the U.S. Supreme Court. We expect Judge Jackson to make her opening statement at any moment. Right now, she's currently being introduced by some of her friends from law school. Her nomination is a historic one. If confirmed, she would become the first black woman to sit on the Supreme Court in its more than 200-year history. So far today, we've seen senators from both sides of the aisle giving their own opening statements, a clear divide emerging among them as some Republicans try to paint Judge Jackson as soft on crime, and Democrats hail her background as a much-needed asset on the Supreme Court. Let's get right to senior Capitol Hill correspondent Garrett Haake. Garrett, give us your take on the tone and what we've heard so far in the opening statements.
Lester, we've heard a lot about history, much of it about the historic nature of Judge Jackson's nomination from Democrats primarily, but even some Republicans who say the time has come for the court to look more like America and for there to be an African-American woman sitting on it. We've also heard about more recent history, mainly from Republicans talking about the 2018 Kavanaugh nomination hearings and what some Republicans described as the circus those hearings became. Those Republicans vowing that even as they dig into Judge Jackson's record and ask what they promise will be difficult questions, they will remain respectful, and that the tone of these hearings over the next few days won't ever end up looking like the tone of those hearings from just a few years past. Now, as I said, even Republicans who've been praising Judge Jackson for her qualifications may still trip over her judicial philosophy. I think we'll hear a lot of questions about that. And her biggest barrier over these next few days may not be anything in her own record, either as a federal judge or a public defender or in any of the other roles she has had in her life. It may simply be the increasingly partisan nature of hearings just like this one. We'll hear from Judge Jackson tonight, still no word exactly from the White House on her opening statements, and then the questioning begins in earnest tomorrow morning.
Garrett, thank you. Here's a little more of the background of 51-year-old Ketanji Brown Jackson. She was raised in Florida by parents who worked in the public school system. After graduating Harvard Law School, she clerked for Justice Breyer, the man she is now slated to replace. She served on the U.S. Sentencing Commission and worked as a federal public defender. President Barack Obama nominated her to be a district judge, and around a year ago, President Biden elevated her to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit. We want to go now to NBC News Justice correspondent Pete Williams. And Pete, essentially what we just said, she's been there before in terms of seeking confirmation from the Senate.
Yeah, she probably has more experience at these hearings than some members of the Judiciary Committee. This will be her fourth Senate confirmation hearing. She's also a former high school national oratory champ, so she's an accomplished speaker. At 51, she would be the second youngest member of the court, and because she'd succeed Stephen Breyer, she would not change the court's current ideological balance with its 6-3 conservative supermajority. She has no record as a judge on the kind of hot-button issues that often dominate these confirmation hearings for Supreme Court nominees on abortion or gun rights or freedom of religion, and many questions about her time as a public defender and what, as you noted, some Republicans say they'll say is a soft-on-crime record. She will probably point out that one of her uncles was Miami's police chief and another was a police detective. It's worth pointing out, Lester, that if she is confirmed, which Senate leaders say could happen as early as April, she will have to wait before she becomes a Supreme Court justice. She'll be a justice in waiting. That's because there won't be a vacancy until Justice Breyer steps down at the end of the term, and that probably won't be until early July, Lester.
Pete Williams, thank you. Here with me now is NBC News political analyst Eugene Robinson and NBC News Washington correspondent Yamiche Alcindor. Yamiche, let me begin with you. These things typically take there's a rhythm to them. We kind of know how they're going to start, and we kind of know how they're going to end. Is this one any different?
In that way, not really, because we have this feeling of Republicans coming in with what they have listed as their sort of attack. There's the criminal justice issues. There's possibly some attacks having to do with affirmative action and her service on the Harvard University board. There is this question of her her decisions regarding former President Trump. He ruled against her. She was the judge that famously said presidents are not kings, related to the January January 6th committee. But there are going to be some fireworks here, but not to the extent at all that we saw with Brett Kavanaugh. Republicans have brought that up time and time again during this hearing already. So I don't think it's going to be that bad. But the other thing I should note is that I've talked to a lot of people who are close to this judge, Judge Jackson, and they say that she's someone who is poised, who is really, really calm, who studies very hard. So she is ready to answer these questions in a way that will be not emotional, that will really be listed and focused on her legal background.
And she is now being sworn in.
Before the committee will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Let the record reflect that the judge has answered in the affirmative, and having met that requirement, you may now proceed with your remarks.
Chairman Durbin, Ranking Member Grassley, and distinguished members of the Judiciary Committee, thank you for convening this hearing and for considering my nomination as Associate Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States. I am humbled and honored to be here. And I am also truly grateful for the generous introductions that my former judicial colleague, Judge Tom Griffith, and my close friend, Professor Lisa Fairfax, have so graciously provided. I'm also very thankful for the confidence that President Biden has placed in me and for the kindness that he and the First Lady and the Vice President and the Second Gentleman have extended to me and my family. Today will be the fourth time that I've had the honor of appearing before this committee to be considered for confirmation. Over the past 3 weeks, I have also had the honor of meeting each member of this committee separately, and I've met with 45 senators in total. Your careful attention to my nomination demonstrates your dedication to the crucial role that the Senate plays in this constitutional process, and I thank you. And while I'm on the subject of gratitude, I must also pause to reaffirm my thanks to God, for it is faith that sustains me at this moment. Even prior to today, I can honestly say that my life has been blessed beyond measure. The first of my many blessings is the fact that I was born in this great nation a little over 50 years ago in September of 1970. Congress had enacted 2 Civil Rights Acts in the decade before, and like so many who had experienced lawful racial segregation firsthand, my parents, Johnny and Ellery Brown, left their hometown of Miami, Florida, and moved to Washington, D.C. to experience new freedom. When I was born here in Washington, my parents were public school teachers, and to express both pride in their heritage and hope for the future, they gave me an African name, Ketanji Onyeka, which they were told means lovely one. My parents taught me that unlike the many barriers that they had had to face growing up, my path was clearer, so that if I worked hard and I believed in myself in America, I could do anything or be anything I wanted to be. Like so many families in this country, they worked long hours and sacrificed to provide their children every opportunity to reach their God-given potential. My parents have been married for almost 54 years, and they're here with me today. I cannot possibly thank them enough for everything they've done for me. I love you, Mom and Dad. My father, in particular, bears responsibility for my interest in the law. When I was 4, we moved back to Miami so that he could be a full-time law student, and we lived on the campus of the University of Miami Law School. During those years, my mother pulled double duty, working as the sole breadwinner of our family while also guiding and inspiring 4-year-old me. My very earliest memories are of watching my father study. He had his stack of law books on the kitchen table while I sat across from him with my stack of coloring books. My parents also instilled in me and my younger brother, Ketanji, the importance of public service. After graduating from Howard University, Ketanji started out as a police officer, following two of our uncles. After the September 11th attacks on our country, Ketanji volunteered for the Army and eventually became an infantry officer serving 2 tours of duty in the Middle East. Ketanji is here today providing his love and support as always. And speaking of unconditional love, I would like to introduce you to my husband of 25 years, Dr. Patrick Jackson. I have no doubt that without him by my side from the very beginning of this incredible professional journey, none of this would have been possible. We met in college more than 3 decades ago, and since then, he's been the best husband, father, and friend I could ever imagine. Patrick, I love you. William, Patrick's identical twin brother, is here as well, along with his wonderful wife, Dana. Also here from Park City, Utah, are Patrick's older brother, Gardy, and his wife, Natalie. And last, but certainly not least, my very dear in-laws, the matriarch and patriarch of the Jackson family, Pamela and Gardner Jackson, have traveled here from Boston to be with me today. I'm saving a special moment in this introduction for my daughters, Talia and Layla. Girls, I know it has not been easy as I've tried to navigate the challenges of juggling my career and motherhood. And I fully admit that I did not always get the balance right. But I hope that you've seen that with hard work, determination, and love, it can be done. I am so looking forward to seeing what each of you chooses to do with your amazing lives in this incredible country. I love you so much. There are so many others who are not here today, but whom I need to acknowledge. I have a large extended family on both sides. They are watching from Florida, North Carolina, New Jersey, Connecticut, New York, Massachusetts, Colorado, and beyond. I also have incredible friends. 3 of my college roommates came here today to support me, and I have so many other boosters from Miami Palmetto Senior High School, Harvard undergrad, Harvard Law School, and all throughout my personal and professional life. I've also had extraordinary mentors, like my high school debate coach, Fran Berger, may she rest in peace. She invested fully in me, including taking me to Harvard, the first I'd ever really thought of it, to enter a speech competition. Mrs. Berger believed in me, and in turn, I believed in myself. In the category of great mentors, it was also my great good fortune to have had the chance to clerk for 3 brilliant jurists, U.S. District Judge Patty Saris, U.S. Court of Appeals Judge Bruce Selya, and Supreme Court Justice Stephen Breyer. These extraordinary people were exceptional role models. Justice Breyer, in particular, not only gave me the greatest job that any young lawyer could ever hope to have, but he also exemplifies what it means to be a Supreme Court justice of the highest level of skill and integrity, civility, and grace. It is extremely humbling to be considered for Justice Breyer's seat, and I know that I could never fill his shoes. But if confirmed, I would hope to carry on his spirit. On the day of his Supreme Court nomination, Justice Breyer said, quote, "What is law supposed to do, seen as a whole? It is supposed to allow all people, to live together in a society where they have so many different views, so many different needs, to live together in a way that is more harmonious, that is better, so that they can work productively together." End quote. I could not have said it better myself. Members of this committee, if I am confirmed, I commit to you that I will work productively to support and defend the Constitution and this grand experiment of American democracy that has endured over these past 246 years. I have been a judge for nearly a decade now, and I take that responsibility and my duty to be independent very seriously. I decide cases from a neutral posture. I evaluate the facts, and I interpret and apply the law to the facts of the case before me without fear or favor, consistent with my judicial oath. I know that my role as a judge is a limited one, that the Constitution empowers me only to decide cases and controversies that are properly presented. And I know that my judicial role is further constrained by careful adherence to precedent. Now, in preparing for these hearings, you may have read some of my more than 570 written decisions, and you may have also noticed that my opinions tend to be on the long side. That is because I also believe in transparency, that people should know precisely what I think and the basis for my decision. And all of my professional experiences, including my work as a public defender and as a trial judge, have instilled in me the importance of having each litigant know that the judge in their case has heard them, whether or not their arguments prevail in court. During this hearing, I hope that you will see how much I love our country and the Constitution and the rights that make us free. I stand on the shoulders of so many who have come before me, including Judge Constance Baker Motley, who was the first African-American woman to be appointed to the federal bench and with whom I share a birthday. And like Judge Motley, I have dedicated my career to ensuring that the words engraved on the front of the Supreme Court building, "Equal justice under law," are a reality and not just an ideal. Thank you for this historic chance to join the highest court, to work with brilliant colleagues, to inspire future generations, and to ensure liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Judge Jackson. Well, this is the end of the first day of the first 3 days, which are involving more personal, on a personal level, the senators on the Judiciary Committee. In a way, it's the easiest day because 10 minutes is merely a throat-clearing warm-up for most senators on this committee. Starting tomorrow, there'll be some serious exchange and questions of 30 minutes, and then the following day, 20 minutes for each senator to participate in this. We're looking forward to this opportunity to finally really give you a fulsome opportunity to respond to many of the things that you've heard and to answer direct questions. Members have until Thursday at 5 p.m. to submit questions for the record. We're going to reconvene tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. to begin the 30-minute rounds of questions. We thank all the participants and members of our audience for keeping this dignified, respectful, and civilized, and we hope to continue that tradition tomorrow. The committee stands adjourned.
Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson essentially introducing herself to the committee, and as Senator Durbin said, this was the easiest day because from here on out it becomes the questions and challenges. She spent a little time kind of framing out her decision-making process, her view of the law, getting to know her family, or getting the rest of us to know her family. Here with me now is NBC News political analyst Eugene Robinson again. Eugene, give me your thoughts about her her opening remarks.
Well, you know, today is the day. It's not back and forth. It was opening statements. And so for me, it's the day to take a sort of wider lens to see a black woman sitting in that chair in that hearing was emotional for me. I thought of my mother. I thought of my mother. My mother was a college librarian. My mother-in-law was a researcher at National Institutes of Health. They're both successful in life, but I wonder what more they could have achieved if it were not for the dual glass ceiling that they faced because of when they lived, and they both passed away now. But, you know, they were black and they're women, and that just eliminated them from this possibility and so many other possibilities in our society. And so I thought of that, and I thought of how much society has lost by not understanding that that all people really are created equal and that all people deserve the same opportunity. How much brilliance and potential and achievement we've foregone over the centuries by these glass ceilings, and some very opaque, as a matter of fact, some not glass at all,
well, let me ask
that
you,
we've imposed.
Yeah, let me ask you, Misha, I'll send her this sense of history that Eugene talks about. How will that carry through these proceedings, or will we get right back into what we tend to know, how these things work?
I think it will carry through. 233 years it took to get to this moment. And I was struck by the fact that she talked about her parents naming her Ketanji. And then talking to her friend, including Lisa Fairfax, who introduced her, I talked to them over the weekend, and they said Ketanji Brown Jackson would make sure that people could say her name, even when she was a freshman in college, because she wanted people to understand the sort of significance of the fact that her parents had decided to name her this African name. It was also, I think, really not lost on me that she talked about Constance Baker Motley, someone who she shares a birthday with, the first black woman to be on the federal bench. You saw Judge Jackson leaning into that history, her husband getting emotional. And to me, it was in some ways indicative of how everyone in that room who was really taking in that history felt. It's this real moment in American history where things are really feeling like they're changing. The other thing I should note is that one of her friends, Antoinette Coakley, she told me over the weekend that she predicted that her friend would be the first black woman on the Supreme Court. And this was when they were in college. And she said that because she was someone who was convening study groups, who was reaching across to other students who deeply loved the black community at Harvard, the close-knit community that the students there formed. But she also went outside that community to invite people in, and she would have these big study groups in her dorms where a lot of her friends met her. So this is someone who also understood sort of the need to reach across all sorts of ethnicities, also all sorts of cultures to really bring people together. So I think we're going to see that carry through these hearings.
All right, let me go back to Garrett Haake right now on Capitol Hill, our senior Capitol Hill correspondent. So Garrett, take us from here. What happens next?
Well, Lester, tomorrow will be the longest day of this process. It could run 12 hours or more. We'll see each senator getting the opportunity to ask questions for 30 minutes at a time. There's really no other format in Congress that allows for such a lengthy back and forth between just one member and a witness, in this case, the nominee. So each senator will see Democrats probably try to probe certain elements of Ketanji Brown Jackson's personal background and her judicial philosophy to highlight her qualifications for the American people. And I suspect we'll see Republicans, including perhaps some of the 3 Republicans on this committee who are thought to be presidential contenders or in waiting in 2024, trying to undermine some of those credentials, probe around her judicial philosophy. We mentioned the soft on crime bullet point. That's one of those that we might see. But we also might see deep dives on some specific issues of interest to these senators. Wednesday will be slightly shorter. Senators will only get 20 minutes at a go to question Judge Jackson. But again, those two could be very, very long days for which the judge has been preparing for weeks, including with mock sessions with White House lawyers, preparing her for what she's about to sit through.
All right, Garrett, thank you. I want to go back to NBC News Justice correspondent Pete Williams now. Pete, as you and others have noted, that this nomination does not potentially change the center of gravity, ideological gravity in the Supreme Court. Will that change, do you think, how Republicans will go after her? Will they hold back and realize this is not the hill maybe they want to die on?
Oh, I suspect a little of that, Lester. The other thing is they're going to have a hard time coming up with something new. Remember, she just went through this 8 months ago when she was nominated for the Court of Appeals. So she's been through a lot of these questions before about decisions she made during her 8 years as a judge, a trial judge here in Washington. Now, granted, Supreme Court confirmation hearings are always different. But what isn't changed is her record. And if they're going to ask her about the record, this is sort of asked and answered before. For example, it's expected they'll ask her about her time as a public defender, during which she did represent a Guantanamo Bay detainee. I thought it was interesting, Lester, that she made a point of introducing her brother today, who served in the Army, because when she was asked about this during her Court of Appeals confirmation hearing, she said, yes, she did represent a Gitmo detainee, but the position she had to take as a public defender did not necessarily represent her personal views, and she mentioned the fact that her brother was serving in the Army at the time. So just 8 months ago, just 8 months on the Court of Appeals, and by the way, Lester, that is not the shortest time for a Supreme Court nominee. David Souter had been on the U.S. Appeals Court only 5 months before he got on the Supreme Court. And finally, Lester, a point of personal privilege. I just want to point out how important she said her background in high school debate was. That's something I concur with.
I'm sure you would. All right. Thanks for that. Let's go back to Eugene very quickly. At the end of the day, will she have Republican votes?
I would guess no more than 2 or 3 at the most, and I'm not sure she'll have any. We'll have to see how the hearing develops. There are a few potentials. A few have admitted the possibility of voting for her. So we'll see how the hearing goes. As Pete said, the questions have really been asked and answered. So it's a question of whether they feel they have to show this sort of unified opposition to anything President Biden proposes, or if they frankly look at the record the way they looked at it last year, then I think she gets some Republican
And we
votes.
heard, as you mentioned earlier, we heard the Kavanaugh hearing mentioned. I mean, Republicans have certainly remember what their candidates went through.
Absolutely. They brought it up multiple times today. I think the thing to watch is the Republicans who have 2024 aspirations. So that's the Josh Hawley, the Tom Cotton, the Ted Cruz, who happen to go to Harvard at the same time as her. These are the senators that are going to be bringing up things that they want to make sure are highlighted, and they also want to be creating moments. I also talked to a conservative judge, Judge Luddick, who decided to endorse Ketanji Brown Jackson, and he told me that he was disturbed by the politics that have become involved in these Supreme Court nominations. He himself was twice nominated to the Supreme Court, and he said he wanted to endorse Judge Jackson to try to take that off a little bit, to try to diffuse the politics in all this. But diffusing the politics on Capitol Hill is much, much harder than one letter endorsing this judge. So I'm watching for sort of those sorts of back and forth with this judge.
All right. But thanks to both of you for being with us. That concludes our coverage. We'll have much more tonight on NBC Nightly News. We'll be back on the air tomorrow morning to bring you day 2 of Ketanji Brown Jackson's confirmation hearings, when senators will begin their questioning of the judge. That starts at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. For all of us here at NBC News, I'm Lester Holt in New York. Good day.